Hello, and welcome to Washington Exec's video series. I'm Amanda Ziadeh, senior reporter with Washington Exec, and today I'll be moderating a panel discussion on IT modernization and digital transformation. We'll be discussing successful modernization efforts and the importance of collaboration in all stages of the modernization lifecycle. Our panelists today are Tony Plater, Chief Information Security Officer for the Department of the Navy, Josh Jackson, Senior Vice President of SAIC's Naval Business, and Ray Wulff, Industry Lead for Global Defense and Intelligence Programs at Appian. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So my first question for you all are, what are the essential ingredients for a successful digital transformation effort? Josh, we'll start with you.
I've spent my entire career on large-scale systems engineering and digital transformation efforts for different defense organizations. I've been with SAIC 20 years, and I currently have the privilege of leading the Navy and the Marine Corps portfolio of programs to do just that. So kind of back to your question, fundamentally, digital transformation, I think we have to focus on the transformation part. And often we get wrapped up in the technology, but transformation is hard, it's messy, it's contentious at times, but the result is a beautiful thing that enables complex missions to go off without a hitch. You know, whether they're enterprise missions or warfighting missions or some sort of citizen service. So I think the essential elements or ingredients are a holistic approach, right? It's the technology plus the mission orientation plus the organization, which includes human beings. You know, they say 70% of transformation efforts fail to reach their objectives because of a lack of an integrated or holistic approach. And I think that's, you know, essentially what you have to do is look at it from those multiple dimensions all the way through the process while you're beginning your cloud migration journey, if that's something that's important, or your entire digital transformation journey. But looking at it through those lenses all the way through the process, I think is essential.
Thanks, Josh. And Ray.
Anytime you're looking at a transformation, you have to look at strategic, what is strategic and what is tactical. And what I mean by that is you want to have a long-term plan, but you also have to have something that is tactical, something that'll show results, and you can test early, and I would say deploy early so that you can say, okay, how are we moving forward? If we're not trying those, you've heard the phrase, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Well, some of these transformation projects, they get bogged down too much on, let's do something in a big bang approach, or let's do something so audacious that it never actually gets there. So being able to roll something that you can get feedback from the users, feedback from the field, and then say, okay, is this secure? Is this something that we can roll out on a larger scale? And then build on it from there. Where you see failures is the scope creep becomes epic, and next thing you know, from a modernization standpoint, it's no longer modern because it's taken so long to roll out.
And Tony, our government perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Just a little about myself. I am, as you mentioned earlier, I'm Don, Chief Information Security Officer. So I work in a very diverse environment. So as Chief Information Security Officer, I'm working very closely with the Navy. Then I'm also working very closely with the Marine Corps. So we try to we have to create a plan that's, you know, naval, that provides the framework, but gives them the room for implementation. So I generally start to think about championing when I talk about digital transformation is, you know, what is the digital business strategy? You know, what sets the direction of our initiatives, commonly referred to as setting a North Star. What is that information technology and operating model? You know, this is about giving thought to how will value be created and delivered with speed and agility for our connected IT. And, you know, of course, we have a lot of diversified IT because we're talking about business systems, war fighting, we're talking about ashore and afloat. And then bringing that culture into it. And it's essential that we be collaborative and keep in mind that we need to empower our folks. So once we get that technology foundation laid out in a form that supports our digital platforms, I think it sets a great start. And for Don specifically, you know, we have the information superiority vision, and that serves as our North Star, you know, that we must modernize, innovate, and defend. And I talked a little about that, you know, that modernization of how do we reduce that technical debt through this digital transformation, moving forward with technologies, but we got to account for those denied, disrupted, intermittent, and limited bandwidth environments, as I talked about earlier, afloat. And that digital transformation must take into account the advancements in 5G, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cloud services. So all this innovation helps us from the endpoint to the tactical edge. And me as CISO, I'm especially focused on, I have to defend data wherever it resides while we're doing this transformation. We want to do it in a secure, in an approach that enables us to monitor our environment.
Well, thank you all so much for those insights. I also want to discuss cybersecurity in terms of digital modernization. Does cybersecurity enable digital transformation efforts? Tony, since this falls directly within your purview, we'll start with you.
I would say yes. Cybersecurity can enable digital transformation, but I would like to note that transformation can enable cybersecurity. So let me explain. Cybersecurity enables digital transformation if your cybersecurity processes and solutions are agile, efficient, and most importantly, risk-based. Cybersecurity solutions and processes that do not support the agility needed to modernize will be seen as a barrier. So that's very important to my community, to the fleet, to the warfighter, that cybersecurity is seen as an enabler. So that's kind of something we work on every day to look at how are we making decisions, and are we making it from a threat-informed perspective. So we're working hard to transform those processes to better support the need to modernize. I talked about earlier, we have a lot of technical debt. So how do we get after that modernization? That's one piece. But how do I support, how does the team support from the Don modernizing in such a way that we're still watching for cybersecurity, we're still watching our security posture, and we're making cybersecurity an enabler? Because modernizing does gain, we do get a better real-time awareness of our security posture. So that's what I meant by to say transformation can enable cybersecurity, because that digital transformation and that modernization has improved our endpoint security capabilities and offers significant visibility in near real term of what our posture looks like, as well as opportunities to better do breach simulation. So I'm very excited about our digital transformation efforts.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
Cybersecurity is not just an enabler, but it's also an essential item, really, to bake in and build in cybersecurity during the whole digital transformation journey, and vice versa. And there's been some recent policies, orders, mandates for zero trust environments and architectures and approaches. And I think that's all good. I think best practices really have accounted for cybersecurity at the start and in the middle of migration and modernization journeys. And I think that's important. I think for me, the key is it's all about resilience. You want resilient software, you want resilient networks, you want resilient environments. You want your data to be safe and secure. So having that resilience to adapt and overcome unknown situations and environments. And Tony is no stranger to that in the Department of Navy. And so I think we have to be able to account for those variables and create things that are resilient. And that's what I'm most excited about in the cybersecurity space as it relates to digital transformation.
And Ray.
From a software company perspective, I mean, Appian we're designed, developed, and deployed here in the United States. And I'll speak from a software company perspective. From a security standpoint, knowing the provenance of the code, knowing the provenance of, okay, who actually wrote this for a specific platform, I mean, that falls into it too, because that's where feasibly there can be holes, there can be trapdoors, there can be other ways. So as the Navy, but not only the Department of Defense, goes for this modernization and transformation, it's not only looking at the networks, because they're brilliant people looking at the networks, trust me. From my perspective and from Appian's perspective, we also look at, okay, is the underlying software platform, as going through these modernization efforts, sometimes people or teams, they really like to go very, very, very fast, and they don't think about that, of that provenance. So bringing in security early, bringing in day one and saying, look, we're not going to throw this over the hedge at, day zero and say, hey, please bless what I'm trying to deploy. making sure that they're involved at day one. And I think that's really important because the security teams will have a different perspective. They'll have more experience in some of the threats that some of the project teams may not. So my advice is bring them in early, involve them in every step. And like I said, test early. NavAir just did a tremendous job in something they deployed in 8 weeks. And the reason they could do it in 8 weeks is because they brought in security early, they had the threat assessment early, and they could say, okay, we're confident we can roll this out to the organization in a modern, secure way. So that's my perspective, and Appian's from a software perspective.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's clear from all your responses that IT modernization is a whole of organization and even, more than that approach. So considering we are fortunate enough to have a member of government, industry, technology integrator here with us today, I'd like to ask how government, academia, and industry should or could collaborate to accelerate transformation. Tony, we'll start with you.
I think it goes to what Josh was saying, this whole integrated approach and a holistic approach. And I think we value and need to continue to accelerate our efforts to work with academia and industry. So the DON derives, we derive our operational requirements and we identify the needs for new capability and technology. But academia plays a vital role because they do that researching, they drive the breakthroughs in technology to continuously advance and push what I call the limits of what's possible. My office has worked very closely with the Navy Postgraduate School. We worked on several projects, initiatives that have laid the pilots or pathfinders for new technology and new approaches. So a lot of great work going on between the Department of Navy and academia. So finally, the industry, they're doing the innovation. Industry develops and implements cutting edge capabilities for those key tangible products and services that we need. That kind of goes back earlier what I said, protect data wherever it resides, because it's a recognition that industry is innovating for us and creating key deliveries and capabilities that we want to see protected to maintain our advantage. So again, back to playing very closely with academia, the importance of industry, and it's important that it works best when we work in concert with each other to accelerate maturity in new capabilities, and we implement in a secure and operational DON environment. So while the government is responsible for laying out the vision and architecture, industry and academia can help in identifying where there are inefficiencies in our overall architecture and how we can best address those inefficiencies and silos in the organization. So it's great. We've got to continue to accelerate our efforts to work with government and work with industry and academia to maintain that technological advantage to stay ahead of the adversary.
Josh, what's your perspective?
So I agree with Tony that it's a tight relationship amongst government, academia, and industry is critical. And I would even break industry down into a few components in terms of you've got companies that service the government on a regular basis, and you have very small startups. It could be 2 people in their garage that have a niche capability or a solution that might solve a complex challenge, or at least a component of it. And then you've got R&D labs at the universities and some of the federally funded research centers that are doing great research. And I think, the nexus of all of those thoughts and the diversity of thought and perspectives is critical to move faster. A lot of the organizations that we serve talk about speed to the fleet, getting capabilities and solutions out to the sailors and Marines faster. And, I think we collectively have to focus on that and how do we move faster, yet in a secure way, realizing there are threats out there. So I think that's key, is providing an ecosystem where everybody feels like they're contributing and can contribute, but as well get value, so that the universities are getting value for their R&D pipeline, that those very small startups are getting value and some protection in their IP as a small company. And so that, large technology integrators like SAIC are getting value in terms of helping the Navy, the Marine Corps, or any defense organization stitch together a solution that the warfighter needs. So I think that's the key, is that that ecosystem where everybody feels like they're contributing as well as getting value ultimately, so that we can provide mission success for those folks that are downrange or supporting the enterprise.
And a bit more commercial perspective.
Well, in working with universities and working with the government, I think one key thing for dealing with any sort of modernization is understanding where, from a technology readiness level, where is it? Because we can talk about shiny objects that seem really cool, but if they're not applicable or they're not fully mature, we set ourselves up for failure. We're working on things like process mining, where deep data process mining, and even if an organization isn't used to robotic process automation, figuring out where they are on that spectrum for modernization and saying, okay, this may be tip of the spear for you, that you may not be ready for it, or the plans that you have, this is where it may fit in the future. So from an academic standpoint, always understanding what's over the horizon. You have to do that. You have to see what's coming down, because if you're doing applied research and really understanding what's coming way down the pike, that will help you make your decisions for the short term, the medium, long, and short terms, and just trying to figure out where is this going to fit in. Because if you make a decision knowing only what you know now, you may be setting yourself up for failure in the future. And that's why it's really powerful to, I'll say, manage expectations, to say, okay, in working with academic organizations, saying, yes, that's great, but we can't apply that just yet. Either it's not secure or it's not fully baked, but we really want to know about it. On the flip side, in working with government entities and agencies, in just saying, okay, you may be interested in it, but these are either the infrastructure, the security, or support that you would need to take advantage of this. And that's why it goes back to taking small bites and taking a trial or taking a pilot and saying, let me try this. Is this really going to work? And not being afraid of failing, on some of these technologies. I mean, and that's why you do it small. Meanwhile, when you mentioned ERPs and things like that with process mining, that's going to benefit ERPs tremendously, just because of what it'll be able to do and really doing that deep learning. That would be my perspective. I think all three are important, but really knowing where you are in the spectrum of that technology, or from a security posture, or the organization itself, of what's palatable for them.
Well, thank you all. And as we discuss collaboration and working together, Tony, I'm interested in what the top IT modernization challenges are within the Navy and how industry can help to address those better.
Well, we have lots of initiatives and lots of challenges, but I tend to think about what we're doing we're developing a capstone design document, and from that perspective, I think of the top challenges as being optimized for the information environment for cloud. It comes to mind adopting enterprise services and implementing zero trust. And I look to industry to help us better understand what are those challenges for continuing innovation that align with those particular buckets. So in the area of information environment cloud, I think about how we're going to bring in hyper-converged infrastructure, software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking, software-defined wide area networking. Then I pivot over to think about cloud native computing, including need to deploy to the tactical edge. Again, I got to account for our float. And then infrastructure as a code. I mentioned adopt enterprise service, continuous integration, continuous delivery, test early, as Ray talked about as being extremely important to be developed securely from the start. But again, talking about enterprise services, how can I help enable through those services that everyone needs? Site reliability engineering, operational resilience. So lastly, I think about zero trust, which is a very important aspect that we're implementing in accordance with the executive order. We have already been on that trail for many years. So we're working identity credentialing and access management, ICAM, because that is a cornerstone of our zero trust efforts, to include attribute-based access and control. So in summary, the three big buckets as I look at from an overall digitization effort, then becomes, as I say, information environment for cloud, adopting enterprise services, and implementing zero trust.
Great, thanks, Tony. And Ray, from a global perspective, are there some best practices emerging across the DoD, and can you share some of those?
Sure. One thing that's fantastic, and I'm going to speak specifically for something that's happening in the Navy. The Navy at the Marine Corps, they deployed something called the Catalyst program. And the Catalyst program was something for supply chain and logistics. And Don CIO gave it an innovation award this year, and it is a tremendous success. Well, Naval Supply Systems Command said, hey, wait a minute, can we leverage what you've done at the Marine Corps, and not necessarily living on that system, but taking what they've done, taking that posture, and then saying, okay, we can do this and apply this to our mission. I think that is a powerful reuse case, and you're seeing that more and more. For the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, their case management system. Well, NCORS, Navy JAG, said, hey, that's really great. Let's leverage what you're doing and piggyback on that. And so leveraging those innovative programs and applying it to other places within the DoD, that's the great thing about the government. The government can say, oh, this isn't a competitive advantage, I'm going to hold this close to myself. It is, hey, we can, oh, you're doing this? Oh, well, it's a government solution. Hey, can we leverage what you're doing? So those are some of the best practices that we're seeing. And the more that happens and the more that collaboration happens, the great thing is you see it's very accretive. You saw this with with their ideas program. Air Force took it to a program called ConIT, and they're very similar. And they learned lessons learned not only from a security, but from an architecture, from a user, and from a user interface standpoint. So those are some of the best practices. And worldwide, you're seeing this from a ERP perspective, because so many organizations run the same large ERPs, and they're learning. And the Army is providing lessons learned to the Navy, and I can tell you worldwide, the Australians, the United Kingdom, and many others are doing the same thing. So it's a pretty powerful lessons learned, because especially within the U.S. government, you're seeing this across DoD and the federal civilian space doing the same thing.
Well, thank you. And before we switch gears, Josh, is there anything else you'd like to add to Tony or Ray's comments on this topic?
Yeah, on both of these, I guess maybe, our conversation, if I think about our conversation over the last few minutes, I drew out a few themes. One is, strategic thinking in planning the modernization and transformation journey. And two is moving fast and, experimenting. And the third theme that I've kind of picked up on in the last few minutes is transparency and collaboration, right? We need to be willing to share. Ray just gave some great examples of how we can, transfer something that one organization is doing to the benefit of another. And I know Tony provided a couple of examples in a similar fashion. And I think that's how we're going to move faster, is by having that transparency and sharing. And being willing to share and be willing to lower some of the silos that maybe have existed across organizations heretofore. So yeah, some good themes for sure.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for helping us summarize that, Josh. So switching gears a bit, I'm curious how upskilling and retraining the workforce plays a role when adopting or implementing new technology or cyber tools. So Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, it plays a key area where, we're trying to tackle that challenge as always. When we talk about workforce and talent, we're all competing for the same talent from a perspective that, as we talked about earlier, whether it's academia, industry, or the government, we're all trying to modernize. We're all trying to deliver capability, either create capability or deliver capability, which puts us looking for, for the best talent. Part of that is upskilling and retraining part of our existing workforce. So as we talk about modernizing and digitizing, we're identifying what are those skills that we need to add to our workforce or recruit into the workforce. We look at how we recruit. So we key efforts is would be for us, DevSecOps. That's one of my key areas where I want to continue to expand how we develop software, which goes back into what Ray said earlier. How do you bring security in early? So we have to take these processes that have been used in industry for quite some time and make them the default across how we do business. So we're trying to do that in the area of rapid access and in corporate software engineering. And we also have our initiative called Cyber Ready, which we want to move from a snapshot in time compliance perspective to an area where we're always doing readiness. And that ties right into the workforce, because we have to then enable the workforce to have the skills, the retraining, the empowerment. So we have specific initiatives and groups that we're working not only internally with the Don, but with the industry as well as DoD, and trying to prepare our workforce to meet that mission.
Ray, your thoughts?
I think it's a journey. It's not a one stop. And what I mean by that is from security training and making sure that everybody, I think it's a culture thing. You really have to instill that culture every day. It's not a take a course, tick a box, and you're good. From a workforce standpoint, I mean, we start from college interns the summer before they're rising seniors all the way up to our current workforce, and saying everybody has the same challenge of trying to find talent. So just like any good football team, you play with the team you have on the field. And so you have to make sure that every single day from a culture standpoint, they understand how important security is, what the impact of being lax with that security can be. And also not assuming if a person joins an organization, don't assume that they know what your posture is or what the culture is. So reinforcing it on an ongoing basis. So never assume that somebody has the same sort of cultural norms about security as you do or the organization did, let's say in a training 6 months ago. So that's really important. And that goes down from not only just your day-to-day work, but that's also anything that you deploy, anything that you're, from our perspective, anything that goes out into the field. Because if you don't have that posture, if you don't have that culture, then something can slip through the cracks.
And Josh?
Yeah, I agree with Ray. I think to me it boils down to a matter of the culture that you create in an organization when it comes to upskilling and potentially reskilling, especially as you think about technologies and how rapidly they're changing in support of digital transformation. That you have to create an organization and look for individuals that are lifelong learners, realizing that an approach that you might be using this week may become outdated 6 months from now. And we should always be adopting new approaches and technologies, and not just training individuals and teams how to use a particular package or IT application or tool, but more importantly, where and how it fits into the technology stack, into the stack of technologies that supports the mission, and why it is what they're doing is so critically important. Tying back to Ray's comment about the culture that you create. It's not necessarily just about the technology as much as it is about what are you doing and why are you doing it, and underscoring how important that is. Because I think people want to learn new things, but individuals and teams always want to know why and what the context is. And I think that's critically important to communicate as you talk about reskilling and retaining the workforce.
Wonderful. And certainly whenever we talk about IT modernization, people is a massive component. So I appreciate your comments here. So to close, I'd like to look ahead a bit. When we're considering things like federal mandates coming up via executive orders, like Zero Trust adoption, the focus on improving the nation's infrastructure, and a whole other set of areas, I wanted to know, in your opinions, where does the government need to be in terms of IT modernization by the end of the year? So Tony, we'll take it off with you.
Well, we are working hard and definitely aggressively. I have a very forward-leaning chief information officer. As we look, we are right now very interested in our architecture, right? The whole enterprise architecture kind of goes back to what Josh was saying, how everything fits in. We have multiple initiatives that are focused on bringing in zero trust, right? And zero trust is not a solution, it's not a specific technology, but ensuring that our roadmap is aligned with DoD, and that we're working with specifically with all the program offices across the Department of Navy and doing gap analysis, understanding where each one of those programs are and delivering those areas. So for us, it is all about the enterprise architecture. It is all about the overall strategy and roadmap alignment, whether I'm talking about zero trust or in individual pieces such as ICAM, endpoint solution. And then, as I talked about earlier, at the end of the year, for us, making sure we want to implement and be well on the road of what's called cyber ready, so that we are able to assess and authorize and bring all this modern technology that our business owners are seeking. How can we better seek to be able to deliver and approve and authorize and monitor those in a secure fashion? So those are some key things as I look toward now closing out of calendar year 2022.
And Ray, your thoughts?
With any mandate that's coming down, none of them should be a surprise. So I guess the key thing is to be involved early and often, and so that there isn't a surprise coming down the roadmap, and so that from a feasibility standpoint, how feasible some of the mandates are, what are the real timelines and things of that nature. Where the federal government should be at the end of this year, you know what? I from a question standpoint, I don't want to give a deadline of saying, hey, by December 31st, they should be here, because that's not my role. But my role is to work with them and say, okay, if these are your goals and this is where you're trying to get, and Appian wants to get to work with you, where do you want to be by then? And make sure that if there's a blocker, we let you know early on. If there's an accelerator, we know where things can be accelerated, and never assume that our problems are their problems, or their problems are our problems, and just making sure that, again, the lines of communication are open. There's always challenges, and there's always these deadlines that come up. I think the most important thing is just having the lines of communication open, and respecting where not only industry, but academia and the government is trying to go, and supporting it any which way we can.
Wonderful. And Josh?
Yeah, so I would say simply it's advancing the journey, right? I think we all saw in the last 2 years that maybe the transformation journey in some regard had been accelerated due to the necessities around COVID and the way we work. And so in some regard, the adoption curve accelerated in some journeys, others was already there. So I would say advancing the journey and moving is the most critical piece, and in multiple ways, whether it's zero trust adoption, so I think each organization has to look at where they are and where they want to be, and lay out a roadmap. And if you don't have a roadmap, then I think that's the first critical step in your journey, is to define that roadmap. And as Ray mentioned, companies like Appian and SAIC exist to enable our customers' roadmap and accelerate it where possible. And so, whether it's Tony's roadmap or whether it's the overall Don CIO and where the Department of Navy wants to go in their own journey, or any other organization, we exist to enable and hopefully accelerate that roadmap. And so I think that's the most critical piece, is looking for areas where you can move faster. Ray and Tony both talked about experimentation and, starting small with a pilot and then looking to scale it. And I think I would love to see more of that across the entire ecosystem.
Right. Wonderful. Well, Tony, Ray, and Josh, thank you so much for your insights and your perspective today. We've covered the IT modernization journey from success to collaboration, talent, and more. So appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much.